Okay, let's talk about the sometimes dark art of making money as an illustrator. My name's Rachel. I've been doing this for over a decade now. I recently made a video about art licensing, which you guys seem to find quite helpful. So I thought that I would follow it up with all the other ways that I make money, because the other ways are the main ways. Art licensing via platforms like Creative Market and my own website is kind of a bit of a sideline thing that I do. So I thought I'd talk about the other main ways in hopes that this helps you if you're starting out, if you're curious, if you're confused. But here is a little layout of 3 of the ways that I make an income from drawing pictures. I'm going to jump in with my favourite way, and it's probably the way that I have made the most income over the years. It's kind of the core occupation of my business. So that is working on commission. I do a lot of t-shirt graphics. That just seems to be the niche that I sort of found my way into. I hate the word niche, but it's just the little specialisation that I kind of fell into, I think because I loved psychedelic poster art, comic books, tattoos, things that really translated easily into shirt graphics, and specifically music shirt graphics and surf companies, and more recently Western companies. So that's the specifics of what I do a lot of the time when I'm working on commissions, but it could be anything. You could be working on graphics for stationery, for homewares, it depends. And also these could be licensing agreements more than commission. It depends on the company that you work for. It depends on how badly you want to work for them. It depends on how you negotiate your contracts, but that is another rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down right now. Also because I'm not the greatest at it. But working on commission is the most fulfilling work that I've done by far. It's the most enjoyable. There's a few companies that I've worked with for years, and I hope that I'm working with them for many more years, because you can build up these really great working relationships where you know what your expectations are. There's a lot of trust, and it really removes some of those unknowns that you can find when you're working in the creative industries. So every time you take on a new client for commission work, there is a level of risk because you can't be sure what their expectations are, what the deliverables will be, their communication style. There's a lot of trust involved in working this way. If you can build those kind of relationships and work on those kind of projects, I would highly recommend that for illustrators as a place to sort of build your bread and butter. The next one I'm going to jump into is probably one that's quite specific to me, but in a general way, I would recommend doing this if you could, or if you want to, if it's something that helps you feel more comfortable working in the creative industries. So I studied as a journalist. I also did a little bit of study for graphic design, and I worked as a graphic designer in-house. So since going out full-time freelance, I've also maintained relationships with the companies that I used to work for, so I still occasionally write freelance. I write copy and PR for companies, and I do graphic design. I do some packaging and branding work. So I've maintained the anchors of my kind of old career. It's something that helps give structure to my work. So the commission work just sort of pops up on a semi-regular basis, but there are no guarantees that it will keep showing up. The work that I do on contract is a little bit more reliable. It's a bit more boring. I get paid by the hour, so it doesn't blow out. Like, say if you're working on a commission project and the illustration becomes more and more detailed, there's lots of changes, you can bill those hours in. That can be part of your contract agreement. Like I said, that's another rabbit hole. But when you're working on commission, you're rarely working paid by the hour. So with things like graphic design, or in my case, writing, you are getting paid by the hour. So what you do is what you get paid for. So in ways, that provides a little bit more stability and structure to my working life and working schedule. But again, this is the kind of thing that will be specific to you, what your skills are, what your sideline skills are. But it's also worth noting that there is absolutely no shame in having a gig on the side. You don't need to monetize every hobby. You don't need to be a full-time paid artist. You can be doing a little bit of everything to keep the money rolling in. And I have found that after a long time working in this industry, sometimes it's nice to just have a job that you do and then you leave it alone. It's done. Our work as illustrators can be so tied to our identity that it can be hard to just put it down and leave it alone sometimes. So I do find that it is a nice switch up sometimes to just do work that's just work. The third way that I make money as an illustrator, and I haven't been doing it lately, since COVID I probably dropped off doing this a bit, but I have always made prints, stickers, shirts, merch, all kinds of little bits and pieces that are self-generated, self-driven kind of projects. So that is taking your artwork and figuring out how to sell it through your own e-commerce store. I would highly recommend it if people are asking you for prints or for shirts to give it a go. I actually personally hate producing products. So the stress and sometimes disappointment of working on things like sourcing and sampling just drives me crazy. So I nowadays really stick to prints with my printers who I know and trust, and stickers and just little things like that. When I said I dropped off a bit after COVID, it was because the cost of postage has gone up considerably, especially living out here in Australia. So that's one thing to consider if you want to go down that path, especially if you're based in somewhere like Australia, where a lot of my audience is actually over in the States, but it costs about $25 to send a parcel to the States. So I've had to reconsider whether or not it's worth trying to sell things through my e-commerce store, which is kind of where I crossed over into selling digital products and doing the art licensing stuff that I mentioned in the last video. That kind of has taken the place of a lot of my e-commerce income, just because I've let it slide, because it sort of was becoming a bit more of an indulgence rather than a good return on investment. So those are the three main other ways that I make money apart from doing the art licensing through Creative Market and through my own website. So a couple of last little bits and pieces to wrap it all up. There are a few other little avenues. The art licensing that I mentioned, I do that through Creative Market and through my own website. There are so many other ways to license your work. I'm not super experienced in that area. I just do my little bit that I'm used to doing. Haven't really explored it that much further, but I think it's a really good avenue to go down as an illustrator. You get to keep ownership of your work. You get to see it out in the world. I think it's a really great way to do things. I also receive income from royalties from an app that use my graphics in a coloring app. That's really cool. Love that they support artists. It's a couple $100 every quarter. It's just a nice little extra. I've done things like live painting. I've worked as a brand ambassador. I've spoken at events. I occasionally do an exhibition when I have time. And I also occasionally do branding projects, logos, things like that. I guess that falls under the like working as a graphic design contractor. But there's all kinds of little bits and pieces that you can pick up if you need to and when you need to. Like I said, there is no shame in having a side gig which is a normal job, a normal 9 to 5. I worked a corporate job for years when I was establishing myself as an illustrator. There are arguments for both sides. Doing what you love full-time is a pretty amazing privilege, but it can also be super stressful. It can be unpredictable, but it's also amazing. Working a solid 9 to 5 job and doing your art as a hobby is also amazing because you get to keep that thing purely for what you want to do. No one is going to tell you what to do, which that is so delightful and not at all diminished. You are still an artist. What you do is still important. It is no less valuable because you don't do it full time. I think that's a really important thing to understand. We don't need to monetize everything that we love. I mean, it's easy for me to say as someone who's worked in this industry, but I don't know that I always will. This is just the things that I do. These are the things that I've specialized in because my interests have kind of dragged me down that path. I'm not a super ambitious person. I don't plan anything, so maybe not the best person to take advice off. But if you too are a unambitious, unplanned person, you can find your way down the road.